Hello, and welcome to Hard Hat Heroines, project highlights from women in construction, with your hosts, Eve and Sarah.
Hello, we've got Abby Fright as our guest today. Hi, Abby.
Hello.
We have three Mace girls here, ex-Mace, and you two actually work together. Shall we hear the Sarah and Abby origin story?
I remember you joining Mace. I was the grad, technically. I think I had 2 years work experience by the time Sarah arrived on the scene, but I was a Mace grad, trying to build a hospital that I don't think ever actually went anywhere, unfortunately.
What I call Project Wedgie. We won't name the client. It was a site that was an isosceles triangle, and they wanted to put a bunch of operating theatres in the basement. I don't even need to come work in healthcare fit out to know that's a no-no. But it was the only way that we could get it to fit on the floor plate. Do you remember, Abby? And it was like loads of stuff around. What do we do with the tip of the triangle? And it was a project that was very difficult to get off the ground. We worked in a small team, but it was a really good team. I did enjoy it. It was all women, actually. We had a very, very, very good line manager called Kristen. Abby, I just remember you doing a lot of Excel and also a lot of meeting minutes.
I remember an 8-hour meeting and I was taking minutes, and the only way I could take minutes was to write down almost word for word what people are saying. There was no way of trying to sift through it until afterwards.
If that 8-hour meeting should ever be required, maybe a topic for another day. But
Eve, you would have loved it, Abby. Do you remember the client? They were like, I want a Bentley, but I'm only willing to pay for a Skoda. Do you remember that exact line?
it's something that I hear people say about clients. It's nothing I've ever heard a client say. Literally just admitting.
They brought this architect. He was lovely, slightly older architect. He did it all by hand, beautiful drawings, A3 paper. It was only when he did a drawing of this triangle and then next to it, here's how much space you want for your Bentley. It was like a square, almost as big as the triangle. Oh dear.
Abby, I know you've put together the Abby roadmap. It is a super interesting story.
It's been an interesting time. I knew almost from the start, as soon as I realised I wanted to do engineering, I wanted to do offshore engineering specifically. I think it's because my beloved and recently late Gramps was a naval engineer, and he was on the boats, and I just loved him very dearly. Just love the sea. I'm from Tor Bay, and the sea was, you smell it every morning. But yeah, so when I was at Bristol Uni, I did a placement at Fugro. That was my first offshore wind farm, called the Efficient Offshore Wind Farm Programme. And that was the start. And off the back of that, left uni and worked for Wood Group Mustang, as they were called then. They are a consultancy that do steel for oil and gas platforms, but they were also doing the Efficient Offshore Wind Programme. That's where I grew my love of steel, because it turns out steel does what you tell it to. No surprises. You can push, bend, do whatever you like within reason. And it just works. I really appreciate that about steel. There's not many things you could say that about. I can't believe they let me do so much playing with that old platform for a grad, basically. After that, I went to Mace because working for oil and gas is cyclical. They hired me to be a PM, at least a grad. That's where I met Sarah. We had to go at this hospital. But yeah, as Sarah rightly pointed out, my heart was always in the maths. From there to Arup, where I then started again as a geotechnical grad this time. That was great. I met one of my favourite females ever, and maybe you should interview her next. Helen Dingle, absolute hero, one of the cleverest women I've ever met.
What was it specifically that you love about her?
One good example is one of my friends. We call ourselves Team Akita. I still talk to him. I remember there was a significant panic about a code we were using on Akita and Ashiro. Everyone was running around in all directions trying to figure out what on earth this code was. And I remember Anthony had sent out an email and Helen replied with one line, the answer is it's 1.3. Problem solved. She was just like that in all things. A conversation was a maximum of 10 minutes. If she couldn't solve it for you within 5 minutes, it was a serious problem. It's very solution focused, which I just have a lot of time for. Yeah, she's also just lovely, just really sweet as a person. And oh my goodness, she is clever. Some things in geotechnics is more magic than science sometimes, but somehow she always made it make sense, bring back to science. But I also remember one time we were talking about very complicated things, but we got there, and then we had a moment where we said, okay, so the answer is just 3 plus 5. That's 8, right? I think it's 8. And and after this really long and detailed conversation, we had to put it into a calculator. 3 plus 5 equals 8, because we were just in the realms of algebra and no number made sense to us anymore. I had a great time and I learned so much. Lots of people at Arup were lovely. Still in contact with most of them. But after Arup, I went to Gavin and Doherty Geosolutions to do some more wins. You might notice in my diagram, there's a Kita and a Shiro, and then Dawlish, which I've also got to talk about later. A few more smaller wind farms. I really wanted to do wind. I really wanted to get back into offshore. GDG is a strong contender in that. So I went to GDG. But then the role at Ramble came up, which is actually a design manager role. So it's an engineering manager, maybe is another word for it. Exactly a specialist at anything at this point. I've done 5 years geo, 2 years structural, half a year in project management. And I think I've lost a year or two somewhere. I think I'm 10 years-ish now. I think I've just got that spread. I'm quite good at organising people. So I'm a design manager now, enjoying it, doing wind every day at Ramble. And it's a lovely team and I'm having a great time. It's been 2 years, going strong.
I think there's something to be said for range over a defined career path. Having this range gives you different parts of the construction puzzle you can bring into any role, those different experiences that can contribute to you as a whole in your career. I think it's special.
Yeah, I think so. Everyone at Ramble, particularly the design managers, they're generally all steel-based people. So they come to me with geotechnical questions, which I don't really manage to answer. It's good to have that spread. It's helpful for engineering managers to have a peer to ask high-level questions. Sometimes engineering managers' answer to a question is different to geotechnical engineers and etc. It's good to have the diversity.
I'm curious about what you brought through from your time in project management to your role from that as well, to your design management role.
Pretty much everything Sarah ever taught me.
You did refer to yourself as one of Sarah's babies. I think she's got a few she's been incubating over the years.
You've been planting us all over the place.
And now they're coming on the podcast.
I'm intrigued, Abby. Well, what is it that you genuinely thought I told you other than avoiding project admin?
One of the most important things you ever said to me was PowerPoint is always the answer. If you can put it on a slide, it helps, especially in engineering where everything's so visual. Even a free body diagram, here is the steel, the force is this way. Good. It's just so important. It's amazing how many engineers don't know how to use Microsoft Project. I cannot claim a real strength of it, but whatever I do have seems to astonish. Maybe that's why people think I'm organised. I just know how to use Microsoft Project.
Don't drop the facade. But yeah, I still think the key skill in life is taking something that's very complex and trying to convey it in a way, not to dumb it down, but to make it as accessible as you can. And sometimes like explaining things in a more accessible way, it brings them on the journey with you. And I think it's always helped reduce barriers and friction points, and as well as made it more accessible for people to be like, I get it a lot more, where in a world where we're like, no, you have to know what you're talking about. And especially it is a male dominated environment. It is quite difficult to be like, oh, actually, I'm not sure. If I can't explain it on PowerPoint, I don't fully understand it, or I haven't fully got it.
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. I don't think you understand anything until you can explain it.
Abby, I know you are a chartered engineer. Can you talk with honesty and openness? How long did it take you? What did it involve? How much pain was it? And to anyone thinking about doing it, like, what advice have you got?
I think the ICE did some good work. It does comment on policy. It does a lot more than I even knew way back then, even when I was a future leader, president apprentice at the time. So I actually am all for the ICE increasingly in my working career. With regards to chartership, now I'm older, I probably resent it less. I can look back with rose-tinted glasses. I think setting out some fundamental core things for graduates to learn is extremely valuable. Not every engineering consultancy is as big as Arup or Ramble and has the time to put together that kind of content. Communication is one of their key requirements, contracts, management. The technical is not an afterthought by any means, but it's those things that they don't really teach engineers at university, which in your working career is critical. especially as you go up the chain. It is a little bit of engineers judging whether other engineers are reaching this threshold. So it's completely opinion based in some ways, although you do have to do an interview, or at least I did. They've changed the application process now to make it more open. Now I can look back and now I've got it. I see its value more like engineers in the industry very strongly. It becomes a bit of a problem when companies use it as a bit of stick, or use it as like, oh, you haven't got chartership, therefore you can't get promoted. It's not helpful. I don't think you need it, but I think it's really useful. I think it's useful in life in general as well. I can sign off your passports now I'm chartered. That's quite handy. I was also a resident apprentice with Brittany Harris, another female engineer. She is now a fellow of the ICE. She has made an impact on the industry within the ICE by pushing so hard for sustainability. I've seen it in action. Just putting her hands up in meetings with 2 years of experience, asking MPs why they haven't used the SDGs for things. It's not really done in the industry. She's a trailblazer too. I think that ICE has recognised that, and it needs that, and it needs women, it needs people to work with them from the inside. I can understand people's frustration with the ICE to be an older sort of body, it's kind of traditional. But on the other hand, it is so open to change, doing things well, differently, better, and uses funds quite well, although you have to take advantage of it and keep an eye on it. It was some work to get it done. The actual difficulty was getting people to sign you off, because engineers are busy, especially good engineers. So that was the struggle. But once it's signed off, it's just writing a report. You can bosh that out in a few weekends. I remember revising a lot, probably unnecessarily. First time.
Well, I remember you did media training with them. I remember you coming back from media training and talking about that. Like, again, something that very few people will ever get, but it's so important. Like, media training doesn't need necessarily be the media. It's just how you speak to other stakeholders from other businesses.
They wanted apprentices to be able to be people going for change. They wanted the new generation. They do want forward-thinking people. They really trained us. I've tried to contribute with policy. I contribute with STEM nowadays, mostly talking to kids. Maybe they didn't train me on that. That's but they encourage it, and I'm always down for doing things like that, especially my old school, and where there's people I know, there's contacts. It's easier to do things with people when you've got a link with them.
Let's talk about some of your projects that you've worked on.
This was my first project out of uni. 10,000 tons. They designed it all. They had some of the cleverest structural engineers at Wood Group Mustang, the Hayworths. One of the last few topsides probably that will actually be made new. It got floated from Malaysia around Africa through the Straits. I can't remember. It probably went through the Straits. It went a long way. And eventually it came around. Everisen, I think, was a famous Norwegian. They've named it after him. It's in the North Sea now. They had a very clever engineer do the lifting steel, which you can't see here because all the lifting steel is temporary. It literally is just to lift it one time from its barge onto the yellow jacket, which you can just see it goes into the water. But yeah, it's a 10,000 ton lift, so not small. They got the Saipem round to lift it. Very sadly, I remember it very well. One Friday, this slightly older, lovely gentleman walking around the office, and then he died. The next Friday, it's gone. And the lift was coming in. I started looking through his calculations. Beautiful, beautiful calculations. He drew trusses, but also the details of the trusses by hand, not to scale necessarily, but just to understand the directions of all the forces. I worked it all out, designed this lifting steel, which they could adjust until the last minute, or take into account the possible sling locations for the and he did it all. But I was starting to check through it all. I remember putting it all into Excel, running it 4 times for different configurations, and his design was within all of them. That shows what you can do as an engineer. Make something ready for all possible scenarios. Quite something for one man to wrap their head around, but let alone a little graduate 3 months out of university. Maybe I did it in Excel, but I did it. I remember coming into work one Monday, one of the Hayworths, Mike, they lifted it on Friday. And I think I nearly fell on the floor. Just didn't tell me it was coming, didn't tell me what it, but lifted this enormous, how much is that in pounds? God knows how many pounds of steel. It was my steel that held it up, and it was fine. It was a mill pond, perfect day, no wind. I can't believe that happens looking back. That was the first thing I did out of university.
Not a small thing, Abby.
Nope.
And did anyone check those Excel formulas?
Yeah, we had those on them.
You did have eyeballs on it. It wasn't just like check the previous engineers' handwritten calculations and engineering sheets. In your case, you'd have some eyeballs. That's a big ask. It's like most graduates would never get that experience that soon out of university. That's certainly my experience anyway.
No, I completely agree. I think, when I first embarked on the checking of this engineer's calculations, I hope someone had already checked his calculations because they'd already built the steel. If I found a problem, it was too late anyway. Once I'd done my calcs, we also had a computer model. My calcs were, if you like, a second QA, probably when he passed away, bless his heart. I think everyone was a bit, thank God Abby's, or at least someone was having a look at it. It was quite a skeleton team at that point.
It's people who deliver projects, right? Not businesses. I've heard other people where they've lost key project people. They can be almost like body blows on small kind of lean teams. These are often very tight-knit groups of people coming together. They are often extremely trusted within their field as well. I would love to be a fly on the wall watching you come in fresh out of uni, because I don't know how you were, but I knew nothing post-university.
His calculations were amazing. Yeah, he really understood it. Some of the things man can do when they put their minds to it is quite incredible. I think that's why we're all here. It's beautiful to see.
Absolutely. One of the amazing things about construction is the fact that you can be such a vital part of a team. There's something about that can be so much more rewarding than some other careers where being there or not may not impact the outcome. But in construction, it really does. Like individuals, the way that they work with the team, the knowledge that they bring, their attitude is so important. You spoke about being solution focused, just get in and do it. And that's the opportunities that you have in engineering, in construction, that I think make it such an exciting career path.
Yeah, there's so much you can do with steel. That's an aggressive environment. The soil, waves, wind, the loads that has to withstand. It sits in the ocean and people go and work on here. You've got to keep everyone safe. You've got to hope to God that your steel doesn't fail, and that enormous topside, who knows how many hundreds of millions of pounds, is not swimming with the fishes. That was a great experience.
In the sense of like showing the cool shit that you can work on straight out of uni. You can do slides from McKinsey or do this. It's totally incredible. The fact you've got to do it after uni blows my mind. Like, what a project.
I think the next highlight, you saying once when we were looking at a building, don't you think structures is your heart? Yeah.
There's offshore wind farm in Japan.
Abby, have you been out to see it in real life?
No, it's very sad. I've been to Japan a couple of times. I've never seen it. It's in the northwestern part of Japan. It's actually where you wouldn't really go as a tourist. Maybe one day we'll go back for the sakura blossoms and see it then.
What was the top highlight of the project for you?
I think someone posting that it was in. I was like, oh my God, we really did something.
And they said, there's the PM in you coming out. The highlight was it was done and it works. That's a job well done.
That's what it's about at the end of the day, isn't it? As an engineer, you work hard so you can make it. Glad to have done it. We just had built up sort of such a camaraderie. I mean, it's like, oh, Geo late again. It had been no longer funny, and it came all the way back round to just being funny again. Yeah, we really tried. I remember at one point, we were still engineering me on the Thursday. Oh, they need us to write up everything by tomorrow. We hadn't written up anything. We did not know we had to write up anything. There was a lot to write up. I remember as well ringing around the geotechnical engineers, trying to scrounge up some kind of resource to write up everything. The main geo person was on holiday, I think. There was me trying to man the fort, ringing up people. Hello, yes, I know you're busy designing monopiles, but we also need to write everything up by tomorrow. Yes, everything. And we did it. I don't know how, but we did. That's the kind of project it was. I look back and it's a great time, but I was so stressed.
As Eve says, it's so weird how the project could be one of the most stressful projects you'd ever have worked on. But with hindsight, you're like, somehow that's like one of my favorites. And I think that's something that's very interesting because at the time you're like, this is shit, I'm going through hell, everything's on fire, I'm on fire. And then time passes and you look back and you're like, and then the bonds with those team are often so strong.
Yeah, the bonds are really strong. But I remember thinking, how can there be this much fire in the ocean? But there really was.
Yeah, that should be a sticker, Abby. This finishes, and where do we go next?
Yeah, in Arup, I was a part of the geotechnical infrastructure team. And I was lucky to work under Helen, who was offshore wind specifically. But after Akita and Ashiro, there were other wind farms, kind of smaller pieces. This was like Akita and Ashiro was the big one for me anyway. I also did a lot of infrastructure things which were interesting. The next one on my winding path was the Dawlish Marine Parade. Probably everyone remembers this picture on the left. That's not what you want to walk out of your balcony onto one very wet morning. I'm from Torquay. Just north of there is a place called Dawlish, and that is where this railway fell down in 2014. You can clearly see the sea banging on all of that wall. Brunel built it. It's not young. I think it's fair to say it's not unsurprising. One very bad storm brought it down. Arab won basically most of the seawall, and it was the Marine Parade in particular that I worked on because they improved in stages. And yeah, I've spent one summer seconded onto site, watching them build in the sand. I would frolic to the ice cream van every lunchtime, especially in the off season when it wasn't the school holidays and it was very quiet, but it was beautiful sunshine. I think I did half of a night shift. Props to everyone working on night shifts with the sea and night shift. I can't imagine how difficult it was. We were hunting for that red sandstone that you can actually see on the right hand side, the outcrops on the cliffs, the meadfoot beds. I remember digging with the JCB. My job was very simple. They'd dig until they hit red, and then they'd be like, is that the sandstone? I'd be like, yes. And that was my job done. I'd get an ice cream.
You're selling geotechnical. Yeah. I mean, Abby, I mean, don't know why you're saying it's hard, if I'm honest.
Yeah, some parts of it are like just a great time. You know, sometimes it's very stressful. I've been on site and people ringing me up like, have you found the problem yet? Looking for the smoking gun in the ground.
Yeah.
And we did not find it. But sometimes it is really easy. Sometimes you dig and it's red.
There's the good and the bad.
Exactly. This was a great project though. You can kind of see how much impact it had on local community. It really improved the front and accessibility and things like that.
For those that don't come from the UK that are listening, like it's a key route to the very tip of the UK. What is a very key and beautiful part, which is Cornwall. It's not a niche, offshoot, insignificant kind of like route. It's a key route to connect the country. How did you find it going from Akita, where you weren't there in the muck and bullets, to then in Dawlish, where you literally stood on it being like, okay, there's red sand here?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. You just learn so much from the guys. They're all really friendly. There's a general camaraderie. You're all in orange. You're all on the same team, and you're all trying to build a wall, and the ocean's banging on the door. So it's a really unique environment, almost like being on a sports team. You all have the ground and the sea in common. There's always something to talk about, always something to learn. Everyone tries to share with younger ones, and I was clearly a younger one at the time. If you have the right attitude and if you're interested and if you're friendly, then they'll talk to you and teach you things. I remember talking to a surveyor for like 3 hours about his calculation, monitoring the old wall to make sure it wasn't going to fall down because we were digging too much. I learned a lot just listening to him. I really recommend it to be a good geotechnical engineer. There's nothing like digging and seeing what's there.
Biased, but couldn't agree more.
I love being on site. Anytime that I've been back to head office because it's the tender stage or I'm waiting for the next project or whatever, hate it. Right. And then as soon as I'm there, I'm like, why don't we have heating? Why don't we have good coffee? Why am I in the basement? Why is there a bench dripping on my head while I'm trying to work? Like, what is this ridiculousness? But I just always want to be in the thick of it. I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
So Abby, you see yourself then, so your heart is in wind and you see yourself staying there, yeah?
I think so. It's just the ocean. I'm going to stay in the ocean, and offshore wind. You could spend a career on any one thing I might have shown you today. There's so many things in engineering that you could be an expert and spend your life doing it. The sea is where I want to do it. I think wind is the answer. It's the future. I enjoyed Horizon. Obviously, we need oil, but I feel better about my career that I'm contributing to the renewable future of humanity.
Sometimes you have to have the experience of doing it to kind of be like, okay, maybe that's not what feels quite right to me. Maybe I want to take a bit of a different path. And for you, you've got the winding road, but it's actually almost a circle, isn't it? You're now in the place where you're like, it's when this is where I'll stay. But you allowed yourself to have those different experiences to have something really valuable in that.
Yeah, it's all right to not know, clearly.
I think we're not honest enough about this, but there's a lot of value in knowing like what you don't enjoy. I don't think we talk enough kind of around that. And like, as I said to you, like when we were at Mace, the project was interesting. It was a great team, but it wasn't where your heart was at. I remember in your chartership stuff, you were showing me some models you were working on, and you just lit up. And you can have these moments and these bits in your career as well. Oh, actually, I don't really enjoy this part. It doesn't mean that you're on a route that you can't kind of get back to something else. And I think construction and engineering allows that flexibility.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's only 3 projects here, which I've shown you today, but there's so many other things I've done. At Arup, at Mace, Wood Group Mustang, even though they're very topside guys. I did so many different things, GDG as well, although I wasn't there long. I did a wave turbine as well at GDG, which is really interesting. You do a degree and there's just so many options, gives you so many life skills, as does chartership. Even if you do go into project management after you get chartered, it's going to set you up for life, really.
Is there any words of advice that you could give your younger self?
Follow your heart and you'll be okay. When you're young, there's so many ways forward, like the path splits. You kind of have to decide, and then it feels like that's going to be forever. You're so young, forever feels so long. It doesn't have to be. Just go the other way like I did and follow your heart. You'll get there. I'm happy. I've had a great career. I've got time ahead to keep veering around or not. So follow your heart. Be who you are.
I agree. We're going to have to speak to Helen Dingle. Hearing you talk as positively about what a meaningful impact that she's had on your career, on you, there's music to my ears, because they're the type of people we need in the industry. So it's brilliant to hear that you've had that experience.
Wonderful. You've had these really strong female mentors. It's something that can be lacking sometimes in construction, just purely because there's not so many women. It's a reason that I'm really excited about what we're doing at Hard Hat Heroines, showcase stories of women in construction and strong women. And when I've been able to have that in my career, which has been a bit few and far between for me, I have one project director who's going to come on the podcast, actually. She's amazing. It's been really amazing to see someone else in a leadership role who's also a woman. It's that representation thing, isn't it? To be able to see someone else who's like you in those kind of positions. Thank you for being such an amazing guest, Abby. Goodbye for now, and until next time.
Cheers, Abby.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Hard Hat Heroines, project highlights from women in construction. We'd like to give a special shout out to our sponsors, Construction Sport, the charity Building Teams and Saving Lives, Centera Project Communication Software, quicker than emails, better than WhatsApp, less soul destroying than paper, and the Tender Trainers, teaching subcontractors how to tender. Subtract the stress, add the profit. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.